Welcome back, students. Today we are starting with another lesson, which is The Letter by Ketu, and we are again going to discuss some important long questions of the lesson, which cover the central theme of this lesson, important character sketch, especially that of Ali and the postmaster, the message that is delivered through the lesson by Ketu, and the symbolism, such as the symbol of letter, what was the symbol of, how post office was a symbol. We are going to discuss all those things. So let us begin with our first question. The letter highlights the tragic transformation of remorseless hunter into a deeply empathetic father while exposing human insensitivity. Discuss the central theme of the story with reference to the text. So the very first question centers around the theme of this lesson. We have to discuss here how Coachman Ali, who was initially a hunter, remorseless means with no regret. So basically, he used to hunt animals without any regret. Later on, as the story progresses, he turns into this person who is deeply empathetic and very sensitive to other people's and other animals, or basically everyone's feelings. So you have to discuss the central theme along with keeping Ali in the mind. So how can you frame your answer is, first of all, of course, begin by naming the story and the author Ketu, and state the two themes that are mentioned in this story. First, we talk of paternal love, which is unconditional, how every parent loves their child unconditionally without any terms and conditions. Also, at the same time, you talk about societal indifference, like basically here we talk of the postmaster and other people, how society is very indifferent to your feelings. Then you can, in your first paragraph, or basically in your second paragraph, you can begin by mentioning Ali's daily routine, how he used to wake up at dawn in extreme, even in extreme cold or rainy weather, or summer, be it any kind of weather. He used to wake up exactly at the same time in the morning. For 5 years he had been following this routine, and how he slowly transformed from a ruthless hunter to a loving father. Then secondly, you describe the post office, the clerks at the post office, all the staff, how they treated him like a spectacle. He became a joke for them. They used to treat him as a madman, as a crazy person. And ultimately, you conclude your answer with the moral that is, this that is highlighted in this story, which is how real love, that is paternal love, or paternal love or maternal love, basically parental love, transcends physical distance. Even though the daughter was physically far away from him, but the love transcended that distance. But the society only understands grief when it experiences it its own. Especially, this is true with reference to the postmaster. He mocked Ali from the beginning till the end, but at the end of the story, when he himself did not receive a letter from his own daughter, that's when he actually and truly understood the meaning of what grief is. So, let's look at the sample answer now. Ketu's The Letter explores the profound, the deep theme of paternal love, of loneliness, and the universal need for empathy. In his youth, Coachman Ali was a ruthless hunter. He derived pleasure from separating young birds from their parents. So basically, when he hunted the animals, he was also kind of destroying the families, but he never cared for it. However, when his only daughter Miriam married and left for Punjab, he experiences the agonizing ache is pain of separation. For 5 long years, he trudges. Trudges is basically जिसे हम बोलते हैं, walking with extreme force, घसीट कर चलना. So he trudges to the post office every single morning without fail at dawn, even in the bitter cold. When the story begins, we see that the setting is of extreme chilly winters. Enduring the ridicule of postmen just to check if Miriam, his daughter, has written to him. So Ali takes all the joke on him, takes all the criticism, and all the humiliation that the post office people give it to him, all because he just waits for the letter of his own daughter. The story highlights the irony of human nature, how society often mocks the deep emotional pain until they are struck by the similar tragedy. See, it's easier to mock somebody else who's going through some kind of a suffering or pain, but people actually experience what that pain truly is when they go through it by themselves. So, this is what happens with the postmaster when his own daughter's letter does not arrive just for a single day. So, he could not even bear the anticipation of a single day. The post office staff treats Ali as a madman, as somebody who's crazy. And they, even cite different examples of other people who have actually gone mad, and they compare him with Ali. displaying cold bureaucracy. It displays how these bureaucratic people, the people in power, how they are mean and they misuse that, and indifference. Through Ali's relentless wait, Ali continues to wait. Dhumketu displays that love transcends any kind of physical distance or physical mortality, reminding us that true understament requires compassion rather than judgment. Please make a correction. The spelling of judgment here is wrong. It's Judgement. So basically, Dhumketu through this story is making us remember that compassion is what you need, not judgment. When somebody explains their grief to you, when somebody showcases their vulnerability to you, all you do is give them compassion and treat them with kindness. Now, let's look at the next question. Draw a detailed character sketch of Coachman Ali, bringing out his transformation, his patience, and unwavering faith. So, this question simply centers around Coachman Ali without the discussion of theme. And you have to talk about how Ali transformed from a hunter to an empathetic father, how he developed patience over the course of years, and how his faith was unshakable even till the day of his death. So you can begin by introducing Ali as a complex character. See, we all are humans and we are bound to be complex. We're not robots. Our life cannot be monotonous and everybody cannot function the same way. So since we are humans, we feel, we have emotions. So therefore, Ali himself also is a very complex character, and he's defined by his transformation and the fact that he deeply endured all the suffering. So in the past, he used to be a cruel hunter. He was a skilled marksman. He enjoyed, you cannot exactly write, do not mention this way that enjoyed separating young animals. So basically, you write that he enjoyed hunting and thereby he was actually separating young animals from their parents. And he was completely blind to emotional pain. Not even for a moment he thought about how he was separating the children from their parents, the children of animals from their parents. At present, he is transformed. His fatherly instincts are stronger. His own daughter Miriam has departed from him, and this has completely changed his worldview, his perspective. And now he has given up hunting altogether after realizing what the pain of separation actually feels like. Then you can mention how Ali presently has unshakable patience and faith that he will surely get a letter from his daughter Miriam one day. And despite bearing the insult of every single person, he continues to be resiliently visiting the post office, and therefore he has an eternal hope which does not die even after his death. And ultimately, as an act of faith, what happens is that when he gets this feeling that he won't be able to make it the next day, he gives away his last 5 gold guineas that he had saved, the gold coins basically, to one of the postmen, Lakshmi Das, to make sure that the letter, if it comes, reaches his grave. Let's look at the sample answer now. Coachman Ali is the tragic protagonist of the story. Protagonist means the central character. And why tragic? Because ultimately he dies. So, that is the tragedy of this story. Serving as an epitome of eternal devotion and quiet endurance. Epitome means symbol. So, in this story, Ali is a symbol of paternal devotion, the fatherly devotion, and quiet tolerance. In his youth, he was a crack shot who killed animals for sport, for fun. He was oblivious to the suffering of parent birds. Oblivious is basically unknown. Like you can say, he was kind of blind. He did not care about the suffering of the parent birds when he snatched their little ones, their young ones. His own daughter Miriam's departure transforms him completely. Realizing the pain of separation, he gives up hunting entirely, and he understands that all the living creatures share the same capacity for pain, for sadness, for grief. Just like he was suffering for his daughter, those animals also suffered for their own children. Despite failing health every single day, despite the fact that he was getting old and the weather being harsh, he visits the post office every single day for 5 years. Even when insulted by the postmaster, being called a pest or other people mocking him, or him being called a madman, he maintains his composure, he maintains his self-respect and dignity. Knowing his end is near, he offers 5 golden guineas to Lakshmi Das to make sure that Miriam's letter, once it arrives, is delivered to his grave. So you see, he does not give up on hope even till the day of his death. He's still like curious about it, that even if I die, if the letter comes after me, please deliver it to my grave. So that will be like kind of his last contact with his daughter. Ali dies physically, but his spiritual faith conquers death, and the cycle of pain that continues first with the animals and then with Coachman Ali and his daughter. It even continues again in the story through Postmaster and his daughter. Let's look at the next question. Analyze the significance of the post office and the letter as central symbol in Dhoomketu's story. How do these symbols reinforce isolation and hope? So this question is based on symbolism. There are two particular things mentioned here. First is post office, and this is very important. You should know this, that the post office had become a place of pilgrimage. Please mention this in your answers when you write. Pilgrimage is basically जिसको आप तीर्थ का स्थल बोलते हो, तीर्थ स्थान. So for Ali, his the post office, because this was the place that he visited every single day without failure, so it became his temple, it became his pilgrimage. And that letter, what does it represent? Hope, isolation, all of those things you have to discuss in this answer. So how you can begin your answer is, initially you begin by explaining that Dhoomketu uses common objects, letter, post office, these are everyday places and objects to show the emotional state of Coachman Ali. So first, post office, if we talk about, for the clerks and other people who were working there, post office was simply a place where they worked with paper and stamps and delivered their letters and went back home. But for Ali, it was a holy place, it was sacred, it was a house of pilgrimage, which is thief. Because obviously all his hopes, the entire reason that he was alive was related to post office, because he was waiting for a letter from his daughter. Secondly, that letter, it represents connection. This is also another thing talked about in the story. How for people who are working in the post office, every letter is the same, right? For them, it's just a piece of paper carrying some certain information. But for people who actually receive and write that letter, it represents connection between human beings. It represents their emotional validation, the hope. For example, mothers wait for the letter from their children, or a wife waiting for a letter from her husband, or children waiting for their letters. So these letters are connections, these letters are symbols of hope and eventually of redemption for the postmaster. At the end, this same letter becomes a symbol of redemption, becomes a symbol of getting moksha for the postmaster. This letter is the thing through which he is able to, you can say, kind of at least make up for all of his mistakes that he made in the past, as he takes the letter himself to Ali's grave. Then the cold environment, as I mentioned previously, the story begins with the setting of an environment that is extremely silent and cold and chilly. So this actually, and there is also a mention of the fact that when Ali was walking towards the post office, there was not even a single person on the way, along the way. And there was just like, there were very few people who had just woken up, and he could hear the sound of people waking up, and the town like just on the verge of waking up. So basically, the place being isolated represents Ali's state. Deep down, Ali was also lonely. He felt isolated. He was aging. He was almost on the verge of dying. So this was a very dark phase in his life. So that somber setting actually represents Ali's internal emotional state. In conclusion, you can mention how all these symbols eventually bridge the gap between physical reality and the emotional truth. Let's look at the sample answer. In the letter, you can put the letter in inverted commas. Dhoomketu uses everyday objects and locations to convey a deep emotional state, especially of Ali and eventually of the postmaster. Functioning as a microcosm of insensitive society. So basically, that post office was a representation of the society which is insensitive to human feelings and emotions. The post office is a cold mechanical machine. It was a very robotic kind of place. Now, see, the word mechanical is used here. The reason being that these people at the post office, the postmaster and the clerks, none of them felt Ali's emotional pain. Their characters are more like robots. They have no empathy. They have no sympathy. They are very cold and very indifferent to Ali's feelings. So that is why the word mechanical machine has been used. It receives hundreds of letters every day, yet the workers lack basic human empathy. For the clerks, the letters are just papers and names, but to Ali or to anybody waiting, for their letter, this building, this post office is a pilgrimage site. It's a place of worship because this is the place where Ali's soul feels most comfortable. He feels hopeful every single day when he comes to the post office because of the weight of his daughter's letter. Miriam's letter symbolizes hope. It symbolizes salvation. For him, if the letter comes for Ali, first of all, he is hopeful, that the letter would come one day. Secondly, that would be like his salvation. That would be like his pashchatap. He would feel that, for all the crimes, all the sins that I have committed in the past by killing the animals, this, might I got punished this way, that I got to be separated from my own daughter. And also, the letter was proof of love that his daughter still loved him. For 5 years, the letter remains an elusive dream for Ali because the letter has not come. So for Ali, it is still a dream. When a letter finally arrives, Ali is no longer alive. Now that's the biggest irony and the tragedy of the story, that the letter actually arrives towards the end of the story, but by that time it's already been a long time that Ali is not alive to receive it physically, to read it, to be able to know that his daughter actually sent for him. However, the letter serves as the ultimate catalyst, the ultimate turning point or the moving part of the story that breaks the postmaster's arrogance and instills human sympathy in him. So, all his arrogance is shattered when the letter actually comes, and especially because he was waiting for one complete night for his own daughter's letter. And that's when he realized what Ali must have been going through for the last 5 years. So this instills sympathy in him. Now he understands Ali's pain, and now he decides that the very first thing that he will do today is when Ali would come, he would return the letter to him. But ironically, now Ali is obviously dead, so all he sees, all he envisions is Ali's image. The pitch black freezing mornings represent Ali's dreary life, illuminated only by the faint light of his hope for Miriam's letter. So how in the beginning the setting is completely dark. It's not even morning right now. It's freezing. All of this shows the condition of Ali and how the only thing that keeps him alive, that kept him alive, was the hope that Miriam's letter would come one day. Now let's look at the fourth answer. True empathy is often born out of personal suffering. How does the postmaster's attitude towards Ali change when he faces a similar crisis? What is the overarching message of the story? So, this question is completely based on the message of this story and how, see, this story also delivers a very important and significant message, which is that until and unless you don't go through some kind of suffering yourself, you do not feel empathy. There are very less number of people in this world who are empathetic without actually having to go through some suffering. But for most people, I believe that empathy comes when they themselves face a similar situation or any kind of suffering in their life. So in this story, the character of postmaster is one such whose attitude eventually changes towards Ali when he himself goes through a similar crisis. So basically through that you have to mention what is exactly the message of this story. So how can you begin your answer is, initially you first state the main takeaway of this story, the main message, that true empathy comes because of personal suffering. First, you can mention initially the postmaster was arrogant, he was rude, he mocked Ali, he called him a pest, he felt irritated and annoyed looking at him every single day. He viewed the letter strictly as official mail and he called Ali a pest. The turning point in the story comes when his own daughter, the daughter of postmaster who lived somewhere else in another state, now she falls ill in a distant city, and the postmaster now, through the entire night, experiences that anxiety, that worry of waiting, and this breaks his ego, this shatters his ego, and he finally understands what Ali must have been going through, because see, he had to wait for just one single night, and Ali had been waiting for 5 years every single day and night. So now that is the turning point in the story, and he realizes that the letters contain human hearts. Being a postmaster, initially he only viewed letters as simply pieces of paper, and now he understood that every single letter contains feelings and emotions of people rather than just names or addresses. In conclusion, you basically give this summary of the entire lesson, that we must show active empathy before personal sorrow forces us to understand others' pain. So, you how we say that in life you learn anything in two ways. Either you learn by looking at somebody, by looking at someone else, by taking example of somebody else, or you learn after you experience some kind of loss. So this is the latter one here. The postmaster does not learn empathy by looking at Ali's pain, by seeing Ali's pain, or by feeling what Ali feels. He only experiences, he only gets this realization when he himself steps in the same shoes. So let's look at the sample answer. The postmaster represents the unfeeling, bureaucratic mindset of society. You know how society has this mindset that people are indifferent to your feelings. People do not care and do not, tend to your emotional state of mind. Also, society, the people in power, especially the bureaucratic people who have the power to make some changes for you, how often they are very careless and they are indifferent to your feelings. Initially, he treats Ali with utter contempt, calling him a pest and shouting at him when pressed for news. So, there is also a mention of this incident in the story when Ali goes to the postmaster, especially to make the request, to check for his daughter's letter. He shouts at him, he gets irritated, and he even calls him a pest, and he looks at him with disgust. He views the letters purely as official routine. Just as males, he ignores the actual emotional connection that that connects the families. The letters, how they carry emotions of people. The turning point occurs when the postmaster's own daughter falls critically ill. When his own daughter falls ill in another town, as he desperately waits for news from her, his night that he spends in anxiety waiting shatters his emotional detachment. That's when this true empathy develops in him. And before this, he was emotionally detached because everything was going fine in his life. But now, when things take a turn in his life, is that when he realizes the pain of separation. He experiences the same agony, the same pain that Ali suffered for 5 years. And finally, when letter arrives, he holds the letter for Ali. He realizes that letters are not just paper, they carry human emotions, heart, and feelings. So, Dhumketu, the writer, conveys that compassion cannot be forced. You can't force somebody to be kind. Kindness is natural, or it is either inherent, or you become kind because of a certain incident in your life. I cannot simply tell somebody to be kind and force kindness in that person. It either arises from shared human suffering or your own personal suffering. Therefore, the story urges us as readers to practice active empathy, to be empathetic, to be respectful of people's feelings, to even if you cannot help somebody, even if you cannot sympathize with them, just understanding that pain is more than enough as well. And respect the unspoken grief of other people before life forces us to understand through our own personal sorrow. Now let us move on to our last question, question number 5. Discuss the element of poetic irony in the climax of the letter. How does Dhumketu bring closure to Ali's tragic life? So basically, in this last lesson, you have to discuss the irony, especially in the climax scene of the letter. How the letter arrives, but it does so after Ali is no longer alive. So basically, Ali's tragic life, how does it come to an end? Let's discuss how Dhumketu gives closure to that. So you can begin your answer by defining the central irony, the same fact that letter arrives, but Ali is no longer alive to receive it. Then mention the cosmic irony, the fact that for 5 years, every single day, he had been waiting for his letter, and the letter did arrive, but it actually arrived after his death. Then mention Ali's emotional encounter. The postmaster, when receives the letter, when he holds the letter in his hands, and he decides that okay, today, as if today when Ali would come, I would hand him the letter myself. But what he actually sees is Ali's ghost, because Ali is no longer alive. Ali is no longer, there to receive the letter. And the postmaster, completely oblivious to this fact, imagines that Ali is standing on the door, which basically means that he is hallucinating, he is having visions because of his guilt and regret. He imagines that Ali is standing on the door, realizing the ultimate weight of his guilt. So, in the end, the closure comes when Lakshmi Das and the postmaster both go to Ali's grave to deliver that letter. In conclusion, the Ali's absence actually causes a stronger impact. You know how we say in life we care for most of the things often after they have left our lives. So this is what happens in the story. Ali's absence strongly impacts the post office more than his physical presence ever did in the last 5 years. So let's look at the sample answer now. The climax of the letter, the story, is steeped in poetic irony and spiritual redemption. So you see, they are both the things. First of all, of course, it is ironical. The letter comes, but after his death. Moreover, the postmaster and Lakshmi Das delivering the letter at his grave. This is a symbol of spiritual redemption. For 5 long years, Ali braved cold winds. He bore public ridicule, humiliation, for a single letter from his daughter, Miriam. Tragically, when the letter finally arrived, he was already dead. The ultimate irony lies in the postmaster's transformation. The same man who berated Ali, who mocked him, humiliated him, called him a pest and different names, and even compared him to a madman. He now saw a vision of the old man standing at his doorway early in the morning. And when he discovered that Ali had actually died prior, he is left tormented by guilt and by remorse. All he has is remorse. उसको सिर्फ पश्चाताप है. There is nothing he can now do because Ali is no longer alive. In the end, the postmaster, along with Lakshmi Das, both walked to Ali's grave to the place, and they actually put Miriam's letter on his grave. Ali's physical absence is more dominating as compared to his physical presence. And his tragic death has actually forced the living people, the postmaster and other people, to confront their own callousness, to confront their arrogance, to confront their ego, turning a place of unfeeling routine into a sanctuary of repentance. So now the place which was a pilgrimage for Ali also became sacred and holy to postmaster and other people. Even if earlier for them it was just another office, but now it became a place of worship and deep understanding. So I hope you're clear with all the 5 questions. These are extremely important from your exam POV. So read them and revise them well before your exam.